Welcome to my channel, where the scariest stories come to life. Before we dive into today's chilling tale, make sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications, so you never miss a story. Now, let's get into the horror. I was going home from work one evening, and it was just an ordinary day. I work a 9-to-5 office job, so I left work at my usual time. It was around 5:15 p.m. when I got in my car and started the drive back. My commute is pretty standard, about a 30-minute drive along some busy roads and highways. As I was driving, I hit a little bit of traffic, as usual, nothing out of the ordinary. About halfway through my drive, I started feeling this weird sensation, almost like déjà vu, but stronger. It was like I had done this exact drive at this exact moment before. I remember glancing at the clock and seeing it was 5:45 p.m. The strange feeling didn't go away. In fact, it started to get stronger. I tried shaking it off, thinking maybe I was just tired or stressed out. But then, things really started to get bizarre. The traffic around me began to thin out way quicker than it should have. Before I knew it, I was the only car on the road. That never happens around that time of day. I decided to take a slight detour through a side street, hoping to avoid a possible accident or something that had caused the sudden drop in traffic. As I turned onto the side street, it felt like everything around me shifted. The light, the air, the sounds, they all changed. It was subtle, but noticeable. When I got back on the main road, I glanced at the clock again, fully expecting it to be around 6 p.m., given the detour and light traffic. But the clock read 5:30 p.m. I was sure it was 5:45 p.m. when I first looked at it, and I'd been driving for a while since then. I chalked it up to my clock being messed up and continued driving. But when I pulled into my driveway, it was 5:45 p.m. again. Now I was really freaked out. I checked my watch, my phone, and even the clock inside my house. They all confirmed it was indeed 5:45 p.m. I tried to rationalize it, thinking maybe I misread the time earlier, or something like that, but it didn't add up. I remember seeing the clock at 5:45 p.m. when I was still halfway home in heavy traffic. Yet somehow, I managed to complete the rest of my drive, including a detour, and still arrive home at that exact same time. I told my wife about it, and she laughed it off, saying I probably just misread the time, even joking that I was never good at reading the time in the first place. But I know what I saw. The weird déjà vu feeling. The sudden absence of traffic. The time on my clock. It all felt too real to just be a mistake. Since then, I haven't experienced anything like it, but every time I drive that route home, I get a little on edge, half expecting something similar to happen again. I've read about time slips and glitches, and this feels like one of them. But I still can't wrap my head around it. This started about 2 years ago. I was driving home from work one evening when I felt a sudden wave of dizziness. It only lasted a moment, but when it passed, something felt off. I couldn't put my finger on it, but the world seemed slightly different. I shrugged it off, thinking maybe I was just tired. When I got home, I noticed a few small changes. My kitchen table had a different tablecloth, a pattern I didn't recall buying. My cat, Henry, who normally greeted me at the door, didn't come running. Instead, he was calmly sitting on the couch, giving me a look like he didn't recognize me. I told myself I was imagining things, but over the next few weeks, more little differences kept cropping up. My favorite coffee shop had a new menu item I was sure wasn't there before. My next-door neighbor, whom I'd known for years, introduced himself to me like we'd never met. I began to suspect that something was seriously wrong, but I didn't want to sound crazy, so I kept it to myself. Then it happened again. I was at the grocery store when I felt that wave of dizziness, and the world seemed to shimmer around me. I steadied myself against a shelf, and when the feeling passed, I noticed everything looked slightly different once more. The layout of the store had changed. An aisle that previously had snacks on it now had cleaning supplies. Panicked, I rushed home. This time, it was more than just small changes. My car, which had a dent from a fender bender months ago, was suddenly in pristine condition. My apartment had a different couch, and some of my clothes were missing, replaced by others I didn't recognize. To top it all off, my bank account showed transactions I hadn't made. I started keeping a journal of all the changes. Every time I felt that dizziness and the world shifted, I'd note down the differences. It happened several more times over the following months. Sometimes the changes were minor, like a new brand of toothpaste in my bathroom. Other times, they were more significant, like coworkers having different roles or even different names. The worst part is, I'm no longer certain if the world I'm in now is my original one. The differences are all subtle but definite. My best friend suddenly had a sibling that they never had before. My favorite restaurant closed down, even though I distinctly remember dining there just a week ago in another version of my life. The feeling of disorientation is constant. I've tried talking to people about it, but they either don't believe me or think I'm losing my mind. I can't blame them. If someone told me this, I'd probably think the same. I've stopped trying to figure out why this is happening because it's driving me insane. Instead, I'm just trying to adapt to each new shift as best I can. But it's been exhausting, always looking for the next subtle difference, wondering if today is the day I shift again, and what new changes will come with it. I really have no idea how to cope with this. I've been debating whether to post this for a while, because it sounds completely insane. But after reading and listening to glitch stories, I figured it was time to share. This happened to me last year, and I still can't make sense of it. I'm an amateur photographer, and I love taking pictures of nature. There's a state park about an hour's drive from where I live, and I often go there on weekends to relax and snap some shots. This particular weekend was no different. I packed my camera gear and headed out early in the morning. The drive was uneventful, and I arrived at the park just as the sun was starting to rise. The light was perfect, casting a beautiful golden glow over everything. I found a trail that I hadn't explored much before and decided to follow it to see what new perspectives it might offer. About an hour into my hike, I found this amazing spot, a small clearing with a picturesque view of the forest and a distant lake. I spent a good amount of time there, taking what felt like some of the best photos I'd ever captured. I was really excited about how they were turning out. After a couple of hours, I decided to head back. I was eager to get home and upload the photos to my computer to see them on a bigger scale. When I got home, I immediately connected my camera to my laptop and started the upload process. That's when things started getting weird. As the photos were uploading, I noticed something strange. Mixed in with the new photos were some old ones, photos I knew I had deleted months ago. They were from an entirely different trip I took to the same park in the winter. I was sure I cleared my memory card before heading out, as I always do to avoid running out of space. Baffled, I checked the timestamps on the photos. The new ones were correctly dated as from that morning, but the old ones had timestamps from only just recently. It didn't make any sense. I thought maybe there was some glitch with the memory card, so I formatted it again and set it aside. The next weekend, I went out to the park again. Different trail this time, different setup. I took a bunch of new photos, confident I had fixed whatever the issue was. But when I got home and uploaded them, the same thing happened. Mixed in with the new photos were more from that winter trip, ones I was certain I'd deleted. This went on for weeks. Every time I uploaded new photos, the old ones would reappear, even after switching to a different memory card. The mysteriously reappearing photos persisted. I couldn't figure out what was going on. I even took my camera to a professional to see if there was some technical issue, but they found nothing wrong with it. It was driving me crazy. Why were these photos haunting my new ones? To add to the mystery, I noticed that the old photos were slightly different each time they reappeared. Small details would change. A tree that wasn't there before. A different arrangement of clouds. A shift in the light. It was as if they were snapshots from slightly alternate versions of my past visits. I finally decided to stop going to that park for a while. I've taken pictures in other locations, and thankfully, the glitch hasn't followed me there. But I can't shake the feeling that something was off, like a ripple in time or a parallel reality bleeding into mine. I've stopped trying to figure it out and just chalk it up to a glitch in the matrix. But I'm curious, are there any other photographers out there who have had things like this happen to them? If so, let me know. This happened back when the lockdowns were in place. It was a weird and unsettling couple of months, and the memories still linger in my mind. I live alone in a small apartment and work from home as a freelance writer. Given my health conditions, I'm considered high risk, so I was extra cautious during the lockdowns, avoiding physical contact and barely letting anyone into my home. It all started when I discovered a small key on my kitchen counter. It was the type of key you'd use for a suitcase, tiny, with a black rectangular plastic head. I immediately recognized it as being similar to a key from my childhood, the kind my parents used for their suitcase on family trips. But I hadn't owned anything like that, ever. Confused, I tried to figure out how it could have gotten there. I live alone and hadn't had visitors for the longest time. At first, I brushed it off, thinking maybe it had fallen out of an old box or something. I set it aside, planning to deal with it later. Over the next few days, the key started moving. Subtly, at first. I'd leave it on the kitchen counter at night and find it on the coffee table the next morning. I assumed I must have moved it and forgotten. But then, it started appearing in more improbable places. One night, I left it on my desk in my home office, only to find it in the bathroom the next morning. I decided to document its movements. I took pictures of the key's location before I went to bed and checked its position the next morning. Without fail, it was always in a different spot. The movements weren't limited to small distances anymore. The key could be in one room at night and a completely different one the next morning. I started questioning myself, was I sleepwalking? But that didn't fit. I'd never had a history of sleepwalking, and nothing else in my apartment was disturbed. Just the key. Then, one day, the key was gone. I clearly recalled leaving it on the kitchen counter. I even documented it. I tore my apartment apart, searching for it, but couldn't find it anywhere. For a week, it was as if the key had never existed. On the 8th day, I woke up to find the key had reappeared, exactly where I'd first seen it, on the kitchen counter. But as I moved in for a closer look, I realized it wasn't the key. It was a stain in the exact shape of the key. Dark, almost like a shadow. I scrubbed at it, but no amount of cleaning could make it disappear. The key itself never came back. Frustrated, I tried every cleaning method I could think of, but the stain wouldn't budge. Then, one day, it was just gone. No explanation, no trace. It simply vanished. It's been years since I last saw the key, or the shadowy stain. I haven't told anyone about it because I can't bear the thought of people thinking I've lost my mind. But it still haunts me. What was it? Why did it appear and disappear like that? This happened about a year ago, and I still have trouble wrapping my head around it. Here's my experience with what I can only describe as a parallel universe. My name is Alex, and I work as an IT specialist in a mid-sized company. Life was pretty routine: wake up, go to work, come home, sleep, repeat. That is, until one peculiar Saturday morning. I woke up in my bed, but something felt off right away. The light streaming through the window seemed different, warmer, and softer somehow. I brushed it off as my imagination and went about my morning routine. When I walked into the kitchen, I was immediately struck by something odd. There was a blue mug sitting on the counter. I know it doesn't sound like much, but I'd never owned a blue mug in my life. All my mugs were white. I distinctly remember this, because I like the uniformity. A little confused, I picked up the mug and chalked it up to a lapse in memory. Maybe I bought it on a whim and forgot about it, or maybe it was a gift from a long time ago. But things gradually got stranger. As I started making breakfast, I noticed more inconsistencies. The fridge had brands of food that I never bought. When I checked my phone, it showed 3 unread messages from a person named Mark, someone I didn't know. Trying not to freak out, I told myself I must have been dreaming. But everything felt so real. The textures, the smells, the sounds, it was all too vivid for a dream. I sat down and browsed through my phone, and the more I looked, the more unsettling it got. My social media accounts had photos with friends I didn't recognize. There were pictures of me at events I'd never been to, with people I'd never met. I started to panic and decided to call my best friend, Sarah. But when I went through my contacts, her number wasn't there. Instead, I found another Sarah, with a different last name. Desperate, I called her, and to my relief, she answered. "Hey Alex, what's up?" she said, sounding cheerful. "Sarah, something really weird is going on. Do you know who I am?" She laughed. "Of course I know who you are. We went to college together. Are you okay?" It was then I realized I had slipped into some version of my life that felt both familiar and foreign. I tried to explain to Sarah that things felt wrong, but she kept reassuring me that everything was normal. After hanging up, I decided to explore more of this version of my world. I went outside, and everything looked almost the same, but there were subtle differences. The cars parked on the streets were models that didn't exist in my regular world. Even the street names had slight variations. This bizarre experience continued for the entire day. I tried to go about my life as normally as possible, but there was always an underlying current of wrongness. Eventually, exhausted and overwhelmed, I went to bed, hoping it would all make sense in the morning. When I woke up the next day, everything was back to normal. The unfamiliar blue mug was gone, the fridge had my usual brands, and my phone was full of messages and contacts I recognized. I called Sarah, my real best friend, and she greeted me just like she always did. There was no mention of our strange conversation from the day before. I tried to brush it off as a vivid dream, but I knew deep down it wasn't. It was too real, too coherent to be a simple figment of my imagination. Even now, I wonder if I somehow slipped into a parallel universe for that day. If anyone has experienced anything like this, please let me know. It would be comforting to know I'm not alone in this. So I've been sitting on this for a while, but I feel like I need to share it. It's been bugging me for years now. Maybe someone listening has experienced something similar or can offer some kind of explanation. Here goes nothing. This happened 6 years ago when I was around 30. I was on a cross-country road trip to visit my family. I've made this trip quite a few times, usually powering through the 15-hour drive in one go. This time, I left at 3:30 p.m., a little later than I would have liked, but I planned to get to my parents' place around 6:30 to 7 a.m. My dad's retired now and an early riser, so I knew he'd be up, and I planned to sleep until lunchtime when I got there. Everything was going smoothly until around the 6-hour mark. It was about 9:30 p.m. when I felt my eyes getting heavy. I started slipping into microsleeps, those brief moments where you nod off for a second with your eyes wide open, only to be startled awake suddenly. It was scary. I decided after this happened 2 or 3 times that it would be safer to find a place to stay for the night, so I aimed for the next town, which I could see on the horizon. I'd driven this route many times, but I'd never really noticed this town before. I figured it must be one of those blink and you miss it places. When I pulled in, the town seemed almost deserted. It was late, sure, but it felt eerie. Nearly all the businesses were closed, and I didn't see a single person around. I managed to find a motel and went inside. The staff greeted me, but they seemed kind of off, distant, and not very welcoming. The room they gave me was even weirder. Some of the amenities looked more decorative than functional. There were no power sockets to charge my phone, and the TV wouldn't turn on. I couldn't even find a switch. The bed was hard and uncomfortable, like whoever designed it had never slept on a bed before. Feeling uneasy but exhausted, I decided to sleep. I figured my mind must just be overtired, and I'd work it all out in the morning. During the night, I woke up a few times because of strange, unsettling sounds. Metallic groans and other noises I couldn't quite place. The creepiest thing about them was that I couldn't figure out what they were or where they could possibly be coming from. I'd never heard anything like them before in my life. It was unsettling, but due to my exhaustion, I eventually drifted back to sleep. In the morning, I went to check out, but the reception area was empty. It looked like it hadn't been occupied for a while. No one was around, so after waiting for a while, I just left the keys on the desk and headed out. As I drove through the town, it struck me how abandoned everything looked. There were no signs on the streets or businesses, and most places looked like they'd been empty for years. I thought I saw people out of the corner of my eye, but when I turned to look, there was no one there. I even thought I saw a car driving down a distant street, but when I turned to check, nothing was there. I eventually reached my parents' house and told them about my strange experience. They looked at me like I was crazy and said there was never any town where I described. That really freaked me out. On my way back, I set out to find the town again. I wanted to take photos to prove to them, and to myself, that I wasn't going nuts. But when I got to the place where the town should have been, there was nothing there. Just a long abandoned building and a field on the outskirts of where I remembered the town being. I stopped at a gas station in the next town, refueled, and asked the attendant about the town. They said there was no town in that area, nor had there ever been one. I don't know what happened that night. It felt real. It was real. But according to everyone else, it wasn't. Has anyone else experienced something like this? Was it a glitch in reality or something? Or did I slip into a parallel universe? I just can't shake this. Thanks for sticking around till the end. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to give the video a like and leave a comment with your thoughts. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a terrifying tale. See you in the next one.